동이 님지 송도 주베 람 제제 선제 간제 데고 자나 베모 된제 자소라 소와 대소신 로쇼 사시 베게 주시
Mandala offering.
산제 신도 미디 베와이
Namda
정아 첨부 자이니 선제 동네 다지
개와쇼
삼예수
주든
주주로지
어야. 나 드린 건저 돼.
So today,
표시 랍다서.
for the Tibetan youth, mainly, this teaching is aimed for the youth, and many of the younger generation are also paying attention or taking interest in the teachings. So I would like to first say this with regard to the term Chu or Dharma. It has existed for the last 2,000 to 3,000 years, and we are today in the 21st century, where there is great technological and scientific advancements, and therefore what was not within the purview of people's perceptions or in something which is inconceivable in the past, and we have the scientific and technological advancements today. And so at such a time, what is the relevance of the religion? So I wish to talk about this. So for over 1,000 years, or for thousands of years, religion has been something which, when people face difficulties and could not find any other means, so when things were beyond their capability to overcome, then people began to believe in some kind of higher gods or Buddhas and so forth. So today, the reality of our life today is that there are over 7 billion people, human beings on this earth, and amongst the human beings there are those who believe in religion, and there are those who do not believe in religion, and then there are those atheists who are opposed to religion, and then there are those who are indifferent to religions. And so all of these groups of people are same in wanting happiness and not wanting happiness. And so people, even those, if you look at the people who are atheists, who oppose religion, do they have greater happiness or not? And those who are indifferent to the religions, we may not have anything to say about them. But those who are believers in religion, they have something to keep their faith in. For example, Christians, when they face difficulties, they say, oh God, you would know. And so, all the people who believe in theistic religions have some form of God or higher power to keep their faith in and hope in. And all these religions have the same message of practice of love and compassion.
출루카디리 미 출루레스
So usually I say that religions
밀리아
have evolved within human society.
잠지
So humans have religion
개첨부 셔도와
right from our birth. Love and compassion are become very important in our life. And so the basic human nature is that there is love and compassion within us.
그래서 어떤 로마 미직디 국가다 지소를 된
So scientifically also, the scientists say that human beings are social animals or social beings.
차다 지우들이다
And then amongst the animals also,
이를 땡땡에 될
which are social animals,
강을
where the individuals depend on communities, their communities, there is naturally a sense of caring for others. So as human beings, for example, we cannot survive by ourselves alone. And therefore, it's natural for any social animal or social beings where the individuals are dependent on their communities. And so the community is needed for our survival. So this is true. What the scientists are saying is true. And so the basic human nature, which is compassionate and loving, so since this is the case, and the religions are there amongst human race, and therefore these negative or destructive emotions such as anger, jealousy, arrogance, and so forth are there even within the animals. And so these are not seen as good qualities. If we have someone who is very angry, I mean, people would always say, oh, this is an angry person. And someone who is very superstitious also, we talk about them as not being good. Whereas if you have a kind person, whether they are educated or uneducated, rich or poor, if this nature of kindness and affection is there, even birds and animals also appreciate them. So this is very clear. And so other people also appreciate such peoples. And then the different religions also teach love and compassion. So with regard to the religions of India, which evolved around 3,000 years or so, there is a practice of ahimsa or non-violence, and this is based on karuna or compassion. So these practices have been there in the Indian tradition since about 3,000 years or so. So non-violence is a practice that has been there in India. And with regard to the teaching of the Buddha himself, it is based on such a tradition which existed in India before Buddha appeared. So love, compassion, tolerance, contentment, and self-discipline are there in the religious traditions. And so self-discipline is the practice whereby even when you are presented with or the opportunity to harm somebody, you restrain yourself. So the practice of love and compassion, with regard to them, the theistic religions say that because we are all creation or creatures of God, the Creator, and the Creator is full of love, And so all the theistic religious traditions believe God as being loving and compassionate. In our tradition, Buddhist tradition in Tibet, we have deities who are wrathful. So these are in accordance with the practice whereby anger is said to be taken into the path and so forth. And it is not meant for anybody to practice just like that, but people who can actually do such practice. And so in accordance with the physiological structure and the nervous system and so forth of the practitioners, there are these practices of taking the anger into the path, attachment or lust into the path. And it is also mentioned that there is a practice of ignorance, taking ignorance into the path. I have heard about treatise which is called Arali text, but I've never seen it. Perhaps I need to read that. So of course, generally speaking, these three poisons of attachment, anger, and ignorance are to be discarded, eliminated from within our mind stream. But within the context of these tantric practices, like transforming or neutralizing some poison and transforming them into medicine, likewise, with the help of wisdom and method practices, there is a way to transform these destructive emotions into the path. So the wrathful deities have to do with such practices. So those who believe in theistic religion, they say that God is love and compassion, and we as creatures or creation of God, we see the God as like a further figure for us, and He is full of love and compassion. So this is also very nice. So those who believe in theistic religions create a God. It is absolutely wrong to think others as one's enemies and to kill and harm others. So in other words, all the religious traditions teach, have these positive messages of love and compassion. Whereas we maybe claim to be Christians or Muslims or Buddhists sometimes or Hindus, and then we make divisions and practice segregation. Whereas if you practice your religion sincerely, these practices, as I mentioned, love and compassion and so forth, are beneficial to us. So I have many friends amongst the Christians, Jews, and so forth. So they are very nice and kind people. When they sing praises of God, they shed tears. They're moved, so much so that they shed tears. And so there are such good practitioners among my friends, Christians and so forth. And so the main message of these religious traditions is that of love and compassion. Whereas the explanation of the practice of love and compassion is emphasized. When there's emphasis on the love and compassion through logic and reason in the Indian tradition. And with regard to Buddhism, Buddha himself has said that the Buddhas or the sages do not wash away the sins of sentient beings, nor do they remove their suffering with their hands, nor do they transport or shift their own realization into others. But how the Buddhas help? So the Buddhas cannot wash away our sins with water, although of course there are practices of ablution in the religions, and the transmigrator's sufferings are not removed by hands, by the Buddha's hands. So for example, the Buddha Shakyamuni's hands cannot remove our suffering. And also that the qualities of realization and abandonment or within the Buddha himself cannot be shifted into or transferred into us. But how do the Buddhas help is by teaching the truth of reality or suchness. And that is to say, the Buddha shares his own experience with us, how he had proceeded on the path and become enlightened. And so he has shared his own experience with us. So dharma means to hold. So all religions may have the same connotation, which is of dharma, which is to say to protect us from fearful states. And so dharma or Tibetan word chu has the meaning of transforming our mind. So as Tibetans, we have the basic practice of love and compassion right from our childhood. And what is the opposite of love and compassion is that of anger. So this is explained in great detail in the Tibetan Buddhist tradition. So if you are kind, warm-hearted, and loving and compassionate, you feel happy, and people around you, your friends and so forth, also feel happy. So love and compassion, to promote them, cannot be done through medicine, medical treatment, but to work within ourselves. The opposites of love and compassion are anger, jealousy, arrogance, and so forth. And so these need to be reduced from within our mind through mind training our mind. And so this is our aim, to promote and increase love and compassion. And in order to do that, we need to combat jealousy, arrogance, anger, and so forth. These need to be reduced. So you cannot reduce anger through medicine, medical treatment, but through training our mind. We have emotions. As in English, we say emotions. And so within the emotions, there are many different types of emotions. And those which disturb our peace of mind, which in our traditions is explained as arising from inappropriate thinking, and therefore, if you think about the truth as it is, the reality of things as it is, then we can reduce these factors which disturb our peace of mind. These reduce the destructive emotions. So Buddhism has to do with transforming our mind. So whether it's a Sanskrit or Pali tradition, we have the three practices of the three trainings. The first one is ethics, which is not to harm others and be friendly with others through this practice. And through the practice of ethics, we are able to withdraw our mind within ourselves. And thereby, whereas at this stage, our mind is more or less distracted by the sensorial perceptions, sensory perceptions, and therefore the mind runs after beautiful objects, beautiful sights, sounds, and so forth. So these 5 sensory perceptions are more powerful in us as opposed to the mind itself, and therefore we are not able to use our mind as strongly as the sensory perceptions. So of course the negative emotions, these mental afflictions, do not arise from the sensory perceptions, but from the mental consciousness. And therefore, to work against these negative emotions, we need to use our critical judgmental faculty. And so, on the basis of the ethics, we practice single-pointed concentration. So it would be good to do this meditation, single-pointed meditation early in the morning, because what we should do is not to let our sensorial perceptions to run after the stimulus objects, but focus our mind within. So when you are able to use the mind to focus, when in the absence of these distractions to the objects, outside objects, we will be able to experience some kind of a vacuity. And still, when you focus your mind, continue to focus your mind on it, you will be able to experience the luminous and cognitive nature of the mind. And this is what you should use as an object of meditation, without letting the mind go astray and distracted to any other object. And so that you will be able to do better critical analysis of the nature of the mind. Otherwise, when you are distracted too much to the objects outside, then this cannot be done properly. And so, with concentration on this nature, clarity, and or luminous and cognitive nature of the mind, of course, you can do this kind of, cultivate this kind of concentration and do analysis on the nature of things, such as other objects. But when you are able to focus on the mind itself, there will be greater power in your mind to do analytical meditation. So you are not just remaining focused or single-pointedly, but you can also do analysis as to what is suffering, what is happiness, and so forth. And so, to this effect, the Buddha taught the Four Noble Truths. So this is a great summary of the teaching of the Buddha. So, of course, even animals do not want suffering. So we also are the same. But suffering changes. What this shows is that it is dependent on causes and conditions, subject to causes and conditions.
연구도가
while we have suffering, if we think more about it and try to do more, ruminate about suffering, how it is caused to me, and so forth, then you become more and more unhappy, and you become disturbed internally. And so today the doctors and the medical professionals talk about people's blood pressure and so forth also increasing through the disturbance of the mind. And so if you are able to maintain your calmness of your mind, and then it also helps to keep your happiness. And so with regard to suffering, there is a physical one and a mental one. And both of them arise through causes and conditions, but not in and of themselves independently. And therefore the Buddha talked about the cause as the origin of suffering. So with the origin comprise of the karmas, the actions, and our mental afflictions, disturbing emotions. And so the karmas arise through these disturbing emotions. And so Master Nagarjuna says, through the elimination of karma and delusions, there is liberation. Karma and delusion arise from conceptual thought, and these in turn arise through fabrication, and fabrication is seized by emptiness. So if we are able to apply the antidote to these destructive emotions, and the karmas which ensue from them, then what happens is we will be able to attain liberation. And so in this verse, Master Nagarjuna says karma, which are those of the negative karmas and so forth, arise through our delusions or mental afflictions. And mental afflictions arise through inappropriate mentation, inappropriate rumination or thinking. And these in turn arise from how we conceive and actually cling on to how the things appear, which is to say that things appear as if they have some kind of objective independent existence, and we accordingly cling on to that. And therefore, through that, inappropriate mentations or thinking arise. And so from these inappropriate mentation, the negative emotions or disturbing emotions arise. And so what happens is these negative emotions arise when we actually believe what this inappropriate mentation holds on to. And even quantum physicists are saying that things do appear to us as if they have some objective existence, whereas through their analysis, the physical forms and so forth, though they appear as if they have some objective existence, yet when critically analyzed, they do not find anything as being objectively existent. And so when they actually delve into these subtler particles, the subatomic particles and so forth, this objective existence of things which appears as if it's solidly there, they find that to be inexistent. And therefore, as quantum physicists say, that things do not exist objectively as they appear to. And so they actually search within the atoms, the subatomic particles and so forth. And therefore, when they don't find these things having an objective existence as they appear to, they say
나마다 게 뭐심배
there's nothing which exists objectively.
라자라마 나스니
So this is the scientists are saying this through their analytical and analysis.
노쇼 롱고리야 사바레스 르네 사바 니로지 가서 르네 사바레스 야나 로니도 갑자기 거네 quantum physics 때 아니
So Raja Ramana, a Indian nuclear physicist, who is no more, of course, had told me that the quantum physics in the West is something new, whereas in India the concept has already been discovered over 2,000 years ago.
애네 되네마
So he actually quoted certain stanzas of Master Nagarjuna. And so the quantum physicists, when they say that things do not exist objectively, having said that, what they do say is that we can talk about things being existent as long as there is an observer. So as long as an observer is there, there is an observed object. And so this is similar to Chittamatras also say that all things, all phenomena are merely in the nature of the mind. And the Madhyamakas say that things, we can talk about things, existence of things, as long as there is conceptual mind perceiving them.
로테 에네 왕긴 나와 드라마를 샤이나 지기 딘제 인도 에네 소모드 즈버스잖아요 고 에네 짐베 에네 로레 파 로소 에네 소모 요마레스
So the Chittamatras say that the objects are mere reflections of the cognitions which perceive or see them. And therefore, they say there is the non-duality of subject and object. So with regard to the Buddha's statement saying the sages lead beings to liberation through his teaching, by teaching suchness or reality as it is. And in the Heart Sutra, it is mentioned that the Buddha was absorbed in this meditation on the illumination of the profound. And so the illumination of the profound could be interpreted as referring to the two truths, the conventional and the ultimate truths. So though things do exist and they do affect us in our life, yet when we search for the reality, we cannot find anything that we can pinpoint or point our finger at as being this or that. So because they lack any objective essential existence in and of themselves, therefore, they exist by way of designation. Of course, this is also mentioned in the Mula Madhyamaka Karika, and Madhyamaka Avatara also says, so things such as the whole and parts, definitions and definientum and so forth, when they are analyzed through the sevenfold analysis or reasoning, nothing can be found to be this or that, but they still do exist in conventional terms. And also in Mula Madhyamaka Karika, the Nagarjuna says the Tathagata is neither his aggregates nor distinct from them. The Tathagata is not in the aggregates nor that the aggregates are in him. And the Tathagata does not possess the aggregates. What else is Tathagata? And so I use this verse to refer to myself. neither one nor distinct, neither it is in me, neither am I in it, nor they are in me. Who am I? I do not possess the aggregates. Who am I? So when you think along these lines of reasoning, of course, we do have this strong sense of an I, which is so precious and dear to ourselves. But when you actually try to search for your identity, of course, some philosophical schools do assert that the I, the identity of I, is one of the aggregates, such as the mental consciousness. So this is also not feasible because we talk about me and then my consciousness, my mind, my body, and my speech. So we do use these terms to refer to ourselves, our body, our speech, our mind. But though we use these conventions, if we actually search for the identity of the self, where is it? It's not the body, it's not the speech, it's not your mind. Where else is it? And of course, as soon as I wake up in the morning, I do this kind of meditation, analyzing where am I, who am I? And we do, of course, I do exist. I walk, I talk, I eat breakfast and so forth. But still, where is that I? And so, it is merely designated. And so this is taught in the Perfection of Wisdom teachings or sutras in the second turning of the wheel of Dharma. But Buddha, right in the first turning of the wheel of Dharma, the first sermons, the Buddha also taught about the Four Noble Truths. And with regards to the and in the Mahayana Uttara Tantra, it is mentioned that the defilements are adventitious or temporary. So, based on our ignorance, which is a misperception or misconception of reality, so because it is a confusion, there is no sound basis for it. Whereas saying that things do not exist the way they appear to us can be affirmed through our experience. The more we think about it, the clearer it becomes that things do not exist the way they appear to us. Whereas because of ignorance, within which there is a mere not knowing and another one which is the misconception. So, in order to talk about overcoming our destructive emotions and suffering and so forth, we need to see whether this second type of ignorance can be eliminated or not, or overcome or not. And so, ignorance, the object that it holds on to, is not there. And so the Heart Sutra says there's no form and so forth. The form, sound and so forth. So they do appear to have some kind of existence from their own side, but they do not exist. And in the Madhyamaka, Avatara also says in its 6th chapter, verses 34 down, that if things were to have any inherent existence, then it would be tantamount to, there would be 4 different logical absurdities, such as the entities, the Arya beings, meditative absorption would be a cause for destruction of entities.
딩이 닥전스는 팔은 내 여대버지기 말이스.
So those things appear to have some kind of objective existence. They do appear that way to us, but they do not exist the way they appear to us. And the second absurdity, logical absurdity that he points out is that the conventionalities of things would withstand ultimate analysis. So beings dying and taking rebirth and changing from life to life, though they do exist, yet when we search for their identity, you cannot find anything that you can pinpoint as being this or that, taking birth or dying and so forth. And therefore, what this shows is that things are absent of any objective, independent existence. So, it is said in the sutras that the Buddhas teach this truth. And whether the Buddhas appear in the world or not, this truth or the reality of things as being absent of any objective existence is there. So the Buddha gave his teaching, beginning with the Four Noble Truths, teaching on the Four Noble Truths, and then the other turnings of the wheel of Dharma, and then later the Nalanda monastic institution was set up and developed. And so this tradition emphasizes using reason and logic in explaining the teaching of the Buddha, and this tradition of Nalanda monastic institution has spread to Tibet, where we do an analysis into the nature of things. So when you find inconsistencies, even within the words of the Buddha, according to the Nalanda tradition, in accordance with the Nalanda tradition, we can actually reject those as being not literal teaching. So whereas other traditions emphasize more on scriptural citations, I mean, in our tradition we emphasize reason. So this is a general introduction that I have given. We'll have question and answer session. So Master Nagarjuna all those who study Madhyamaka texts regard Master Nagarjuna as the second Buddha or the victorious one. So this is true because he summarized the teaching of the Perfection of Wisdom Sutras and wrote his treatises such as Mula Madhyamaka Karika, the fundamental wisdom verses of the middle way, and so forth. And then Aryadeva, his student, wrote the 400 verses and so forth. And then Buddha Palita wrote Buddha Palita commentary. And then the one who is the supreme amongst the commentators of Master Nagarjuna is Master Chandrakirti. So because we have memorized his Madhyamaka Avatara, entering into the middle way, since our childhood, this is really fortunate of us who have done that. And so Master Chandrakirti, I read his Madhyamaka Avatara Bhashaya, the auto commentary. So we need to use these texts such as the 6 collections of teaching treatises by Master Nagarjuna, and then the 20 verses at the end of the Ratnavali.
가서 강도 마주 뜻이도 뜻이다는 것이도 전주도 전에 주직서도 빼다다디.
So it is mentioned at that so in this Ratnavali by Nagarjuna, he says, "May I be precious like life to all beings, and they be more precious to me. May their negativities ripen upon me, and may all their merits ripen upon me. May all my merits ripen upon them." And so this is very powerful. And then Master Chandrakirti's Madhyamaka Avatara and his auto commentary. An auto commentary, and then we need to actually use these texts for our study of the Buddhist philosophy. So having studied them, we need to be able to do away with all kinds of doubt regarding the points of practices and the teachings in the teachings through contemplation, reflection, day and night. And so that is about gaining conviction through reflection. And as I explained earlier, and then develop concentration, and from within this concentration do analysis into the nature of things. And so what we should do is develop the understanding based on study, hearing the teachings and so forth, understanding through reflection, understanding through meditation. And so if we are able to go through this kind of, follow this procedure, then we can see how the greatness of the Nalanda tradition emphasizing reason and logic. So in Tibet, Master Shantarakshita introduced Nalanda tradition to us, and the Tibetan great masters of their past also followed accordingly, as in accordance with the advice of Master Shantarakshita, by studying the great treatises, and also applying them in one's practice and meditation, and therefore combining study and thereby combining study and meditation, which is amazing. So of course, Buddhism, there are many countries where Buddhism has spread and it's practiced, but there's no one who follows the same kind of tradition as us, where we combine study and practice or meditation. So there are those who emphasize meditation, but not much that of study. So in Tibet, during the time of Songtsen Gampo, Thömisam Buddha devised the Tibetan writing based on Sanskrit. So we have a written form of our language, and using this, we were as the translations were carried out in Tibet, the Tibetan language also developed further and further, and therefore this language is the closest language to that of Sanskrit. And so it is the best language to explain explain Buddhist philosophy. So in the Tibetan schools, if possible, we should be able to, the students should be able to study the second chapter of Pramana Vartika Karika, which is basically explanation of this verse of salutation, the salutation verse of Pramana Samuchaya. So where it says, the one who has become authority or reliable, and one who is compassionate or who thinks of benefiting others, who intends to benefit others, and so forth. So these lines of salutation are explained by the second chapter of Pramana Vartika. If the students could study it in the Pramana Vartika Karika, it is said, a valid cognition is that which is incontrovertible with regard to its object, and so forth. And so, the explanation of explanation of the salutation verse of Pramana Samuchaya in Pramana Vartika is amazing, where Master Dharmakirti actually explains how the Buddha has become a reliable person, how he is a compassionate one, and how the Buddha has become a teacher, a protector or savior, and a Sugata, and so forth. And so, if we are able to study this text, Pramana Vartika Karika, then we will be able to have the tools to actually check whether a person is an authentic or qualified teacher of Dharma or not. So, in explaining this verse, which is towards the end of the Madhyamaka Avatara, where Master Chandrakirti explains this verse, he says, Vasubandhu, Dignaga, and so forth, have they actually abandoned this teaching of suchness or reality? He says, yes. So what the verse says is that even if someone may have a good disposition from the past life and have acquaintance with the teaching of the Buddha and so forth, but this profound truth of the teaching of emptiness cannot still be understood by them. So these masters, Vasubandhu, Dignaga, and so forth, are said to have not understood that profound emptiness as understood by the Madhyamakas. Master Chandrakirti in his auto commentary says that. And so in Tibet we have this tradition of combining both study and practice and meditation to preserve the teaching of the Buddha. And so Master Tsongkhapa came later in Tibet, and since his childhood he was quite interested in the Madhyamaka view.
Lama Kasa.
Lama Umapa.
Lama Umapa.
Kachunjugane, Mekoram,
Lama Umapa.
Lama Umova.
So Master Umapa, who was a teacher of Master Tsongkhapa, when he was a shepherd, he had a vision of a black Manjushri. Even as a child, he had this vision of, and so with the help of Lama Umapa, Master Tsongkhapa was able to ask questions on the Madhyamaka philosophy.
가서 고아로 지찬이 여대버지.
So Master Tsongkhapa had some understanding of the Madhyamaka view, and he asked Manjushri through Lama Umapa whether this understanding of the view is the Chittamatra view or Madhyamaka view, and Manjushri's response was neither.
다들 고금이 무슨 시월이.
And Manjushri gave a very terse, pithy instruction, and Master Tsongkhapa did meditation on it, and actually said to Manjushri that he was not able to understand that instruction. And then Manjushri advised him to go to Hermitage, go into retreat and do practice of purification and also accumulation of merit. And so when he was doing this practice of purification and accumulation of merit, he one day was reading the Mula Madhyamaka Karika in Buddha Palita, with the Buddha Palita commentary, where the Buddha Palita, he was on this verse. If the person were the aggregates, and so forth. And so, while reading the Buddha Palita commentary regarding this verse, he was able to gain insight into emptiness, and accordingly, he felt a great upsurge of sense of called respect to the Buddha, and accordingly wrote this book, this text, in praise of the Buddha for teaching dependent origination. So I have received this teaching on this text from Yongzin Rinpoche. So in our tradition, we find mention of So the first verse, the text gives the salutation verses from Mula Madhyamaka Karika first, the first two verses, where the Buddha is, the way Master Nagarjuna pays homage to the Buddha for teaching dependent origination free from the 8 extremes. So the 8 extremes have to do with the nature, where the continuity of things, and then with regard to object being object, and with regard to expression or language. And then there are those of the different reasonings to prove emptiness, such as the lack of one and many, and then the tetralema and so forth. And so, with these reasonings, what we are doing is we are doing analysis into how things exist. And so when you actually gain insight into this emptiness, which is how things exist, then the objects kind of that you are analyzing to disappear from your perception. So the Buddha is said to be the supreme amongst speakers or teachers. Because of his teaching of how we can develop the wisdom which does away with that of the ignorance which is clinging to that of true existence in things. And so the Buddha, the first verse of this text in praise of dependent origination says, someone who has spoken and seen how things exist makes him the knower and teacher unexcelled. And then I bow to you, O conqueror, you who saw dependent origination and taught it. And the reason why the dependent origination is important is said by the second verse. And so the Buddha taught the Four Noble Truths, and then he explained it in more detail through the 12 links of dependent origination. And so the text says, whatever degeneration there is in the world, the root of all these is ignorance. You taught that it is dependent origination, the seeing of which will undo this ignorance. So what will actually undo this ignorance is the seeing of dependent origination. So in his commentary to Mula Madhyamaka Karika, Master Tsongkhapa, Mula Madhyamaka Karika says that there is nothing which is not dependent, therefore there is nothing which is not empty. And what is dependently arisen is said to be empty, and that is said to be designated, and that is the middle way. So when we talk about emptiness, we are not just saying things cannot be found when we do a critical analysis on them, but they are empty because they are dependently originated or dependently arisen. And therefore, since they are dependently arisen, they do not have any essential existence in and of themselves, and therefore they are dependently originated or dependently arisen. And so the Sanskrit term is partitya samutpada. So dependent origination or dependent arising, which is a very powerful reason. And so how can an intelligent person not comprehend that this path of dependent origination is the essential point of your teaching? This being so, who will find, O Savior, a more wonderful way to praise you than to praise you for having taught this origination through dependence? Verse number 5, whatever depends on conditions that is devoid of intrinsic existence. What excellent instruction can there be more amazing than this proclamation? And so since things are dependently originated, since things lack any essential existence in and of themselves, because they are dependently originated, and therefore there's nothing which is independently existing. And next, verse number 6, by grasping at it, the childish strengthen bondage to extreme views. For the wise, this very fact is the doorway to cut free from the net of elaborations. And since this teaching is not seen elsewhere, you alone are the teacher. Like calling a fox a lion for a Tirthika, the non-Buddhist teachers, it would be a word of flattery. So things arise through dependence, and we talk about objects and subjective mind or perception, and things arise through causes and conditions. So which shows things, when we say things arise through dependence, this shows that things exist. So So until you gain insight and into that things are devoid of any essential existence, you are taught that things arise through dependence, like causes and conditions. And therefore, causes and conditions or arising through dependence is used as a reason to prove that things are absent of any intrinsic existence. So verse number 8, wonderful, wondrous teacher, wondrous refuge, wondrous speech, wondrous savior. I pay homage to that teacher who taught the dependent origination. So it's 10 o'clock now. Verse number 8 done. So Geshe Lobsang Tsongkhapa is thanking His Holiness for accepting to give this teaching. So I'll present you the names, mention the names of people who are going to ask their questions. So Sherabki from the Dalai Lama Institute of Higher Education will. So she's saying the prayer for the long life of His Holiness. So my question is, can you please guide us on applying love and compassion together with the view of dependent origination in our daily life? So from my own experience, I find that self-cherishing attitude is the source of my unhappiness. So because I hold myself to be so dear to myself, when someone provokes me, I become unhappy. And then when I see someone lower or inferior to me, I get arrogant and I become arrogant. So these disturb my peace of mind. And therefore, Master Shantideva says, whatever happiness there is in the world all come from helping others, thinking of others. Wishing others to be happy, whatever suffering there is in the world, all come from wishing myself to be happy. And he also goes on to say that unless you switch your happiness with this others, there's live alone. Attaining Buddhahood, even in samsara, you will not have happiness. And so, this self-cherishing attitude is a source of suffering for us. And in the Lama Chöpa prayer, there is a prayer, a verse which says, may I be able to equal and exchange myself with others. So when we talk about bodhicitta, we do say that in the practice of bodhicitta, we forsake our own happiness and hold and strengthen cherishing others over oneself. And so I find this to be a very wise way of being selfish. So in my own life, I've passed through many difficulties and problems, but have never lost my heart. And so I've been able to stay alert, happy, because of my practice of bodhicitta. So each morning when I wake up, I reflect on bodhicitta and that of the view of emptiness. And so defilements, which are said to be adventitious, and the positive qualities being intrinsic, So as ordinary sentient beings, we all have self-cherishing attitude. So we may say cherishing others over oneself is difficult for us. But if we think about the fact that we are all dependent on each other, that we are dependent on others for our life, I mean, we can see the importance of cherishing others over oneself. In Madhyamaka Avatara, in the beginning, Master Chandrakirti pays homage to compassion rather than using any other object for his homage. So, thinking of bringing happiness or benefit to all sentient beings is based on reason and not just ignorance, and it's not a misunderstanding. So the bodhisattvas, with their compassion, they observe sentient beings. They are focused on sentient beings' well-being, and with their wisdom, they focus on enlightenment. So as soon as I wake up in the morning, my main practice is twofold, the bodhicitta and the view of emptiness. So you also, even if you may not believe in the next life and so forth, but you should know that this narrow-minded, very short-sighted, self-cherishing attitude has to be loosened. As quantum physics also says, things have no objective, things do not exist objectively. I mean, you should think along these lines, and this helps in our daily life if you think about and reflect on them. As I said earlier, the Buddha's teaching of the Buddhas is based on the two truths. So think about these as best as you can. Next is Mr. Jamyang from the same institution, Dalai Lama Institute for Higher Education. So he prayed to be guided throughout one's lifetime. So while modern scientists today attribute our experience of pain and pleasure, anger and attachment, and so memories and so forth to mere activities of our nervous system and brains and particles, Buddhist psychology relates them to the mind, an entity that is invisible. What kind of similarities and differences do you see between these two systems? So the science is based more or less on matter. So there are materialists. And so what they investigate are more or less the physical objects. So if you ask a modern Western scientist about a mental consciousness, which may be different from these sensory perceptions, they may not have any explanation. But today, the scientists are beginning to pay attention, gain some newfound interest in learning about the mind, a mental consciousness. So since towards the end of the 20th century, the scientists have found that through meditation, people are able to actually affect their brain. And so they have begun to see something which affects the brain. So the frontal cortex, or the front part of the brain, seems to have to do with our sensory perceptions.
아더부터 생각부터 지금 이류 돌아야 대상기 도나 차요 말이.
So until recently, these scientists have not paid much attention to our mental consciousness, whereas today, Richard Davidson and others have done actually experiments on people who have done meditation and found that through their meditation and the MRI and so forth, when they took picture, they have actually found that through meditation, people are able to affect their brain. And so in Taiwan, a geshe by the name of Jampa Gyatso has died, and I have actually told the scientists who are doing research on the phenomenon of Tugdam, staying in meditation even after clinical death. So if they could do this, if they could actually check this geshe in Taiwan, who is still in meditation, and one of the former garden throne holders, Tisur Losang Nyimala, also stayed in that Thukdam state for 19 days. And my own senior teacher, the late senior tutor, Jabjaling Rinpoche, Yongzin Ling Rinpoche, also stayed for 13 days in that state. And so today, having done some kind of research on meditators, the scientists are beginning to say that there's something which can affect the brain apart from. So Richie Davidson have told me that in the past, compassion and love are not much talked about amongst within the scientific circle, but today people who are in the education system and so forth are talking about the importance of love and compassion. So until recently, the Western scientists have more or less focused on the brain, and when they talk about mind, they are more or less talking about the brain waves and so forth, whereas today it is a different case. And then with regard to health, the mental hygiene is very important for physical health as well. Mental health. So mental health cannot be gained through medical pills. So as I explained earlier, we need to train our mind and seeing what disturbs our peace of mind, and therefore we should think of love and compassion, and also see that things have no objective independent existence, as quantum physicists also says. And so through this kind of meditation, you will be able to reduce the clinging to the objectivity and things. And so in our daily life, for peace of mind and also calm mind and physical health, these are important. Next is So, Your Holiness, I would like to thank you for all your efforts for everyone, not only Tibetans, all human beings.
안다
Sir, I read the question already before.
지금 대강을 잡아서 마도 한다 이루 아니 그러나 이루디 아주 니쿠베 거둘이야 공연시방 가대어로
So when we fall asleep, all the sensory perceptions cease to work.
또 시바야 라르 신세
And then when we dream, the mind becomes a little bit more grosser. And when we are in deep sleep, it is a subtler state of mind. And so the scientists are doing, of course, research on these states of mind.
성컴을 걸 시우지차 토벌려더래 누적의 체리와 다 신의 뒤로 니십에 매절이야 도나 싸벌려 된 게지 그 신의 양 고수는 연구요리 디 genduchone
So with regard to mind and emotions, the Indian tradition is quite advanced, whereas the Western science is still has to still catch up with this. And so the scientists, the Western scientists, are paying attention to the study about mind and emotions from the Indian tradition that we follow.
풍부디 레바 레 로소 코레 셰바사 지기 예데버지 에네 변호 네 모시부들이 부구슈주들이 경험을 전되게 되는 세우 쉬우지 정해지는 용도.
So it is quite clear from some evidence that we have seen, such as people remembering their past life. This has nothing to do with the body of that life as such, but it shows that there is something called consciousness, which is separate and distinct from the body. And within the mind itself, there are those of the mind, states of mind during the waking state, waking state, the dreaming state, and deep sleep state of mind, and so forth. So we can prove past and future, past life on the basis of the consciousness, not on the basis of the body as such. And so because there is something they can remember, they do remember those things. So what goes from one life to the next is not the sensorial mind, but that of the mental consciousness. And therefore people are able to remember their past life. So even with regard to myself, I was supposed to be remembering my past life when I was a little child. So Kirtan Rinpoche and the search party came to my village. So my mother and our villagers didn't have any knowledge about them. But at that morning, my mother told me that I was quite excited right from very early in the morning. And when Kirtan Rinpoche and the search party were approaching our house, I actually recognized Kirtan Rinpoche and said, Seramang, Seramang. But I do not remember my past life now, today. But it seems I had remembered my past life when I was a little child. So there was one Geshe named Geshe Tupten Siring from Garden Shartse, and a child who was born in Lhasa had actually was telling his parents that he didn't belong to Lhasa, but he belonged to India. And when the parents brought him here to Dharamsala, the child said, this is not my place. My place is in South India. And so the parents went down to South India, and when they reached Montgot, and when they reached Garden Monastery, the child actually recognized his place. and he actually led his parents to his own room where he used to live in his previous life, as Geshe Sering. And so when they reached the room, he actually said, my eyeglasses are in that drawer. And when they pulled the drawer out, and they actually found the glasses there. And so these are very a clear memory of his past life. And then in Patiala, there was an Indian girl who remembered her past life very clearly. And in Kanpur also, and there was another girl who remembered her past life very clearly. And so this is possible on the basis of a very subtle mind that people could remember their past life, not on the basis of the grosser states of the mind. And so the non-Buddhist traditions of India used to say that, since they are not able to actually accept that things are merely designated, a person is merely designated on the basis of mind and the body constituents. Therefore, they assert an Atma, a soul, which is said to be independent from the body. And so it is not dependent on the body. But Buddhists say that there is no such a soul which is permanent, single, and autonomous. But on the basis of the continuity of the mind, we can talk about past and future lives. And then on the basis of this, the aspect or the nature of clarity and awareness or cognitive nature of the mind, we can actually train our mind to cultivate single-pointed concentration and train our mind to remember our past lives. Next is a question from a Tibetan children's village, Upper Tibet TCV school, Tsering Choten. Your Holiness, the three categories that you make within the Tibetan Buddhist literature, science, philosophy, and religion, this teaching of dependent origination comes under which category? So as I explained before, we can actually explain on the basis of love and bodhicitta, and also the emptiness, view of emptiness, which includes what you are talking about, the dependent origination. And these are actually scientific. So if you do not understand the teaching of the Buddha much, then you would only resort to praying to the Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha. So for such a person, the philosophical view of dependent origination and so forth does not make any sense. So which of these categories, three categories, does the content of the text in praise of dependent origination fall into? This is the question. So in Tibet, there was a Lama who was giving on Buddha, giving a teaching on the Buddha and Dhamma and Sangha. And one of the people in the audience asked, "Where is the Buddha?" And the Lama had nothing much to say, but he was not knowledgeable in the Dharma. And so he said, up there in the azure sky, the Buddha is within a crystal castle, radiant crystal castle. So if you have studied the Buddhist teaching, so you cannot understand the philosophy of Buddha. And the teaching of dependent origination or interdependence is something that is scientific as well. So the different religions are beneficial to millions and billions of people on this earth. So all religions teach the practice of love and compassion. Therefore, I respect them sincerely. And so I consider the religious harmony to be very important in the world. Whereas with regard to philosophical teachings, philosophical view, Buddhism is very rich, unlike other religions, especially those of the theistic religions. So most of them base themselves on faith and trust in God and so forth. So Buddhism, particularly the Nalanda tradition, which follows logic and reason, it actually has all three: religion, philosophy, science as well. I am a Buddhist monk, a bhikshu. I follow the Buddha's teaching sincerely. As Master Tsongkhapa says at the end of this so verse number 53, he says, following such a teacher and having become a renunciant and so forth. So I also am a scientist. When I sit with the scientists, so I am a Buddhist monk, a gelong, and I am a Buddhist philosopher, and also I fall within the society of scientists. So Francisco Varela, he was a Buddhist and also a scientist. So when we meet and he explains from the point of view of science, he said, now I'm going to wear the cap, scientific cap. And when he explains from the viewpoint of Buddhism, he says, now I'm wearing the cap of Buddhism, a Buddhist cap. And so
그 등산게다 지 가서 천리기탄에야 지금 로존 셴이야 살 용해서야 천리의 님도라도 낭슈그 뜨루.
The cream of the Buddhist teaching can be actually shared through the understanding and of the Buddhist philosophy. Next, class 12, teacher of class 12, Palden Tashi from TCV, Upper TCV School. The long life prayer verse of His Holiness. So, Your Holiness, the Supreme Leader of Tibetan people, with due respect, my question is, can you explain the concept of creation of universe by God as posited by the theistic traditions, and how this differs from the Buddhist position of karma as the cause behind the evolution of the universe? So, to be simplistic, we can say the world or the universe is created by God. So when I am asked such question, I used to actually jokingly tell people, oh, you have to ask this question to God. So it's quite simple to say that everything is created by God. So the difference. So those who assert a creator God, for them, everything in the universe is creation of God. So all suffering, the happiness, and so forth can be attributed to that creator. And therefore, to overcome this suffering, we can talk about praying to God to solve these problems that we have, to eliminate the suffering. So, of course, logically, I mean, there are lots of difficulties to keep up with this kind of position. So for us, Buddhists, pain and pleasure are the results of our karma, actions, as Mula Madhyamaka Karika verse already, that I already quoted says, karma and delusions come from, I mean, so positive karmas bring about happiness, and by doing good things to others, and negative karmas arise from doing bad actions, harming others. So basically, we can talk about things arising through substantial causes and their cooperative conditions. And so the external world can serve as a cooperative condition for our pain and pleasure as well. So the sun has been there for over 1 billion years, for example, and human beings on this earth evolved quite a long time ago, and so we can attribute the formation or the rise, the human beings and animals and so forth to evolution theory. Theory of evolution. For example, animals in the northern part of India may have good hair, fur, whereas in South India, the animals have shorter hair on their body. So because of the external condition of the climate, these things happen. Whereas if you were to search for why such differences arise, they can be attributed to their karma. So on the one hand, the evolutionary theory of modern science combined with the karmic theory of Buddhism. So in Buddhism, we talk about the era of destruction of the world, and there is an era where there's emptiness in the space, and there is also the era of creation or coming into the being of the universe. And next is Jingmin Dorje from class 12, TCB Upper TCB School. The question, Your Holiness, who are very kind to us, taking this opportunity, I wish to ask this question. Can you explain the difference in their approach to life for those who believe in the three jewels and those who have no faith in the three jewels? So in the beginning, I already explained from my own observation, people who believe in a religion, they have someone or something to keep their hope in when they face difficulties, God or whatever they believe in. And for a Buddhist, for example, whatever difficulties we may face in this life, we still have this belief in a next life, and so there's always hope for us.
그치게 삼류 동적을 돈에 돈린 시야리야.
So people believing in religion actually are able to cope with difficulties through their
야다한테
perception, through their
모두가 그들
thinking, whereas non-believers
캬라나
may become desperate to commit suicide or to take to drugs
최캐면은
and so forth.
그도 yen디 마사나 에네 로베 차체
So they become completely hopeless when something goes wrong with them. They do not have anything that they can keep their hope in, put their hope in. And so as a school child, people of your age, your peers, when they have difficulties by reciting the Om Mani Padme Hum mantra or mantra of Aryatara or mantra of Guru Rinpoche, do they find more, become more calm? So there are those who do not have such means, and they actually complain about things. Have you noticed that? So it's very good that you pose this question to me. You need to actually check in your life what difference do they believe in a religion or not makes to people. So I'll stop here. Wondrous teacher, wondrous refuge, wondrous speaker, wondrous savior. I pay homage to that. Verse number 8. So I'll stop here for today. Verse number 8. Done. Thank you.